Two bits of research out this week on the UK job market have found that there are a lot of problems, despite the improving employment figures. Shelter, the housing charity, says that more than half of all the families living in temporary housing in England are not only in work, but working every hour that they can, while at least half of the people who use recruitment agencies, according to another survey, don't feel they've been dealt with honestly. Guy Shone is an economist and the CEO of Explain the Market. I asked Guy what the research means.
Well, there's two parts to this. So on the surface, job numbers look great at the moment. You know, we've got 32 million people in the UK with a job. But if you look beneath the surface, there's clearly another type of crisis going on. And you could call it an in-work crisis. So you've got many people with a job still really struggling financially. So the shelter research, which came out this week, has found that half of all families who are sleeping in temporary accommodation are actually still people who have got jobs. But there's also other research that's come out this week by an organisation called Any Good, and they talk about big structural problems that we're finding in the jobs market, particularly the fact that we've become a nation totally reliant on recruitment agencies. And actually, many of these recruitment agencies, frankly, are just not trusted by the public.
What are the kind of difficulties then that people are running up against? And I know this is going to sound terribly naive to most of our listeners, but if you're going for a job, why isn't it like it used to be?
Well, it's changed so dramatically. So we've now got 30,000 recruitment agencies across the UK, and that's tripled in the last 5 years. So this is a $35 billion industry. And with that growth, I think, has come some, frankly, quite dodgy practices. So we've heard from people that have been subject to what's called contingency recruiting. So this is recruiters who make up a make-believe job to encourage you to sign up to their agency and then hope that they can sort of find a job that roughly fits the bill afterwards. And there's been all sorts of issues with sort of fees that seem extremely high. And I think part of the problem is that people just find it hard to know who they're dealing with. So people have told us, when we've been out chatting to people in research, that they really trust people who do the job, and they trust people to make recommendations, but they really don't trust either recruiters, typical recruitment agency people, or algorithms. And increasingly, the way the market's going now, we're getting this computer says no type approach. And actually, people, I think, are longing to get back to the idea of, someone who's a real expert at the job making a personal recommendation and actually trying to sort of fit real skills to real jobs.
Isn't it then up to the employer to vet the agency and say that the agency doesn't really live up to their expectations?
Yeah, and I think that's something that's come through in the research too. That actually there are quite a few hiring managers who I think for some time now have looked at the way that the industry works and felt that it's not quite working for them. I think part of the problem people have got is sort of slowly but surely, actually, this has become the only way in which people can hire and people can get jobs. So I think one of the things that it's going to be worth looking at going forward is how do we regulate this market, and are there other things that we can do? So we're now getting some evidence that people are much more trusting of the recommendations of real people and not computers. Well, if that's the case, what can we do to try and actually change things so that people can get some trust back in the recruitment process again?
And I suppose the awful thing from the point of view of somebody who is working, 2 jobs or even 3 jobs, is that you're so busy working for minimum wage or whatever you can get that you've got no time at all to look for the job that you know you can do.
I mean, that was a finding in the shelter research that it's not just that these families, particularly the families who are really struggling, not just they're working, but they're working all the time. You know, they're working every hour they can possibly get, and we know from the economic data that we've seen recently that although there's been a little bit of improvement in average weekly wages growth, it's still not been great for some time. And in fact, actually, the most recent stats on that for the 3 months up until May show that wages growth has sort of dipped again. So there are many people out there who they have a job, but actually just ticking that box doesn't mean that they're necessarily flourishing. And you know, I think there's a lot more that needs to be done to try and sort of take a look under the surface and have a look at this in-jobs crisis.
And can you go along to your local job centre with any expectations these days that they can actually help you?
Well, I think the part of the problem is that there isn't really very clear guidance on what people should do. And one of the downsides, if you like, of the fact there are so many different types of job available and so many different agencies and partners involved in the process is that I think often people are actually a bit confused about what the best first step is to take. So I think that's part of the problem and part of something that we need to look at is how do we not just regulate the process but actually give people very clear guidance. There are so many different recruitment agencies out there now, from construction to catering. There are even recruitment agencies that specialise in just recruiting for recruitment agency jobs. You know, so vast has the industry become. So I think we do need to be careful about making sure people get very clear steps and guidance to help them navigate through the process.
And if you were in that unfortunate position, what would your first step be?
Well, I think the first step is to understand what it is that you're looking for, and to be clear about understanding the company that you're engaged with. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions about how much people are getting. Often the sort of the fee structures of some of these private recruitment firms can be a bit opaque. So don't ever be afraid to ask, you know, how much do you get if I land this job? How long do those fees get paid for? And also make sure you're very clear about what it is you want and what you don't want, because often people sometimes can be encouraged into jobs that aren't quite right for them. Something that came through again in any good research was this lack of trust that traditional recruiters were going to be able to match their particular skills with a job that suited them. So that's something to watch out for too.
Guy Shone from Explain the Market on the confusing world of recruitment agencies.